Hello, it's CisVolk. Time to enjoy card making with me. In this video I will be using CarlaCreates' newest release called Odey's Birthday Party, with all beautiful party products. I will show you two ways on how to use this 3D embossing folder. I will finish the card using CarlaCreates' newest beautiful bold numbers, a piece of glitter cardstock from the Christmas collection, and a nice bow from the Odey's Birthday Party collection named Labels. There's a lot of choice in these two text stamp sets, one in Dutch and one in English, and they can be combined with the numbers as well. Let's get started. To start, I will use a piece of Florence watercolor paper. It is 200 grams and it is my favorite paper for making card panels. It is smooth white paper that gives a nice result with ink blending, but also with coloring. It works very well with dry embossing as well. I want to make a card panel out of this piece that is 1 centimeter smaller than the card base. So I will cut off 1 centimeter at two sides. That means I cut this piece at 9.5 centimeters. And the other side is 14.8 and I want to cut off 1 centimeter, so I will cut it at 13.8 centimeters. The strips I cut off are very useful for stamping sentiments. I want to make an embossed white border with color in the middle. Therefore, I will mask the edges. To find the spots where to make the border, I draw pencil marks at 1/2 inch. I could also draw marks at 1 or 1.5 centimeters, but this ruler has inches on this side, so this is what I use, the easiest way. The measurements do not have to be exactly in inches or centimeters, as long as they are the same around the whole panel. Do what is most useful for you. I do not press too hard on the paper, because the lines have to be removed later. At every corner I draw 2 marks. These marks I can connect when I take a piece of masking tape. This piece of masking tape is far too wide, so I cut off the rest. Because I cut exactly next to the edge of the paper, and I use that paper edge to slide the scissors along, I cut very straight. That helps me to use the rest of the masking paper for the next borders, and so on. We do not want to see the pencil lines after embossing and coloring, so I now take my time to erase them before I emboss. I lift off the corners of the masking tape to see all the pencil lines that have to be erased. The raised embossing will make it difficult to use an eraser, as well as to apply ink on top, so it is best to do that now. I will start by spraying some water on the back of the paper. The side where there is no masking tape is the back. The water helps to keep the paper from tearing when it goes through the embossing folder. This is the CarlaCreates festive embossing folder from the Odey collection. On the raised side of the folder I place the wet side of the paper. The masked side will stay on top. I turn the paper and the folder, so the embossing will cover the paper evenly. Always check that your paper is lined up correctly before you send it through the machine. I'm using the platinum machine from Spellbinders for embossing. It is a bit wider than most European machines and it has longer plates. At the bottom I place the A platform, then an F shim, which is not necessary for every machine or sandwich, then the embossing folder with the hinge facing the opening of the machine, and finally the D adapter plate. I only run it through the embossing machine once. Look at that detail, it is so beautiful. Now I will dry the panel. I want it completely dry, so the ink I add will not run or bleed. I dry both sides of the paper. You can also let it air dry, but I do not want to wait. I will dry the embossing folder as well. Now we place the panel back into the folder. I line it up on the raised side in exactly the same position. Choose an ink color you like. I'm using Peacock Feathers Distress Oxide for this one. I pick up some ink from the ink pad. Then wipe off the extra ink on my glass mat before touching the paper. With very gentle circular motions, I now blend the ink over the embossed panel. It already looks so pretty, right? Try not to press too hard. The softer you apply the ink in several light layers, the nicer the result will be. I want a little darker in some spots, so I keep going just a little bit longer. Each time I can pick up more ink from my glass mat. Because the paper is still laying on the folder, the embossing keeps its shape beautifully. The folder gives the paper strength and it makes the blending much easier. The white shadow lines around the embossed figures make the figures stand out even more. To remove the masking tape easily without tearing the paper, I warm it up with my heat tool. I also use it to dry the ink right away, so I will not leave any fingerprints on the surface. I just bought this heat tool. It is from VaessenCreative. It has 2 heat settings and it reaches temperature in just a few seconds. That is a big improvement compared to my old heat tool, which took about 30 seconds to heat up. I cannot do without a heat tool anymore, as you have probably noticed in my videos. I use it for heat embossing, for drying paper, and as you can see here, for easily removing masking tape without tearing the paper. But did you know it is also very handy for warming up a lid when you cannot open a jar? What do you think about making an embossed panel like this with a masked border? Looks very nice, doesn't it? To finish this card, I will die cut a bow from the labels die set. That bow is a great addition to the large label die as well. I will cut it out of the glitter cardstock from the Christmas collection. I also cut a narrow strip from the same glitter cardstock to match the bow and create a matching ribbon for it. However, I will make a new one with adhesive on the back before cutting. That makes it easier to stick it onto the paper. Now we can add all the text to the card that we want. Here's a stamp set with English texts like hip hip hooray, thank you and greetings, but also get well and you are special. My favorite text on this set is this is a paper hug. And this one has Dutch sentiments like van harte, hiepe de piep, groetjes, bedankt en gefeliciteerd. And what about dit is niet zomaar een kaartje, dit is een papieren knuffel? You can also combine words with lowercase and uppercase letters very nicely. There is so much choice. But I want to use the bold numbers and stamp them to go with the card. I will quickly show you how I made the numbers. First I use anti-static powder on the paper. Then I stick the numbers I want to stamp onto a clear block. I ink them up with VersaMark ink. That is a clear ink. It is hard to see where I stamped, but after adding embossing powder, you can clearly see where the ink was on the paper. For heat embossing, I use Wow embossing powder White Twinkle. It has a gorgeous shine after heat embossing and it matches the glitter cardstock very nicely. Wait a small moment to let the powder cool down before you touch it, or it will smudge and it is hot as well. After melting the powder, I cut the numbers with precision scissors and I leave a small white border around them. I stick the embossed panel raised onto the card base. It adds to the embossing. Check twice to make sure you stick it on the correct side of the paper. I make another small strip that will function as a ribbon for the bow. This time I add double-sided tape to it before cutting. It is easier when it already has adhesive on the back. It makes gluing it onto the panel much easier. And there will be no glue smudges when using double-sided adhesive. Placing it 1/3 down the card makes the layout nicely divided, following the rule of thirds. I should have stuck it down before attaching the card base, but that is no problem, I can still trim the edges. I stick the bow to the card using a foam block. I place it on top of the small strip. Before pressing it down, I check if the numbers fit in a good spot. I also stick the numbers on the card with foam blocks. This first card is finished, but there's another side to the embossing folder as well. Let me show you how to use that. I have a panel here that did not turn out well. If you look closely, you can see that the embossing does not go all the way to the edge of the paper. A card of 14.8 centimeters does not quite fit into this square embossing folder. I do not like to glue the panel on the card like this, so I prefer to trim that edge off. The white mask border has now become a bit narrower than I wanted. That is why, with the previous card, I chose to trim the paper first before masking the edges. Keep that in mind when you make yours. Luckily, the embossed paper can be used on both sides. Again, I use the color Peacock Feathers, just because it is such a happy color. And again I pick up a little bit of ink, spread it out on my glass mat and gently apply it to the embossed paper. This time I decided not to mask an extra white border, but of course you could do that if you like. I now use just one color, but think about using more than one color. Maybe some random spots or an ombre would look nice. Also, happy rainbow colors would do very well on this festive pattern. Now I will stamp the sentiment. I am using the same watercolor paper, so the color and texture will match perfectly with the card panel. You can use a stamping platform, especially when stamping in two colors, but I will show you how you can do it with just a clear block. Hip hip hooray, it is your birthday is the text I want to use. I positioned the entire sentiment in place on the clear block. I want to stamp the small words in blue and the large words in black. If I would apply the black ink now, all the text would be stamped in black. Using a blending foam, I will ink the words that must be blue. That blending foam now becomes my ink pad. I carefully ink up the small words. I want to ink up the large words in black. Inking with black is tricky now, so I have to remove one small word to keep it blue. Carefully ink only the words with the larger letters in black. I could use a smaller ink tool for this, but since the text is straight, I can manage it just fine with the ink pad itself. When I am ready inking up the black words, I put that last blue word back and ink it again, being careful not to touch the black. Using a stamping platform gives you more control, because you can stamp multiple times in the same spot if something goes wrong. My first impression did not turn out well. Maybe because the stamp is new, or maybe I waited too long and the black ink dried up. Or perhaps I used too much anti-static powder. Since I know it is not because of a dry ink pad, I removed one stamp, inked everything up again, placed the blue one back, inked that again, and made a new impression. A bit of creativity is sometimes needed when stamping like this. I stamp extra carefully and press firmly and extra long this time to get a good print. See that the next attempt went great? Heat embossing makes the stamping look so much nicer. Clear embossing powder is the one I use most, because you can emboss any color with it. It makes the color brighter, glossier and gives it a more luxurious look. When cutting, I aim at the plastic holder that touches the paper. I align that edge you see with the top of my text. If I keep the same distance on the other side, I get the same measurements on both sides. To finish the card, I could add some small presents. Or maybe some fun cupcakes. Or a cute balloon. Or perhaps a number. Plenty of choice. When you make a card for someone personally, it is great that you can choose what to add. On the back side of the piece that didn't turn out well, I can stamp perfectly fine. I stamp a balloon and a large cupcake. I stamp these with VaessenCreative ink and heat emboss them with clear embossing powder from Ranger. The same ink I used for the card panel, the color peacock feathers, I now also use to color the images. I like the one color card design. You do not need that many colors to create a beautiful card. Apply a thicker layer of ink onto the edges of the balloon and the sides and bottom of the cupcake. Adding water makes the ink react and gives it a softer bleached look. You can use the water to blend it nicely. Only blend the middle, so the edges stay darker and you get a dimensional effect. To color the top of the cupcake that I want to look white, I use the color Weathered Wood Distress ink. I start by adding some shadow lines on the cupcake and I let it fade into light with a bit of water. CarlaCreates always adds small guide dots to her designs, so you can see exactly where to add a bit more color. I cut out the images and leave a small white border. I like how it makes them pop a little more when glued on the card. But of course you can also cut right along the black outline. I stick the sentiment strip onto the card with double-sided tape and I attach the embossed panel raised with foam blocks. I also use a small foam block under the images to stick them to the panel. And finally I add some highlights with a white gel pen. On my Facebook, Pinterest and Instagram pages you can find more card making inspiration. And of course, you can binge watch all my previous videos. Have you already subscribed to my channel CisVolk? Check the description for product information and links to other videos. Thank you for using my links. I get a small commission when you use them and have your cookie settings turned on. I hope you feel inspired to work with your embossing folders and start making some beautiful cards. If you would like to share your creations, please tag me and CarlaCreates. We love to share your work. Enjoy card making! See you next time! Bye bye!